The wheat and the darnel in this life are there side by side. I remember in France, during our manual work at La Trappe, thinking to myself during one afternoon of work how there were two worlds juxtaposed in this afternoon of work. Why? La Trappe was a model farm in Normandy, and they would send people from the agricultural college to spend time seeing how things were done in a modern farm. And so we had workers, young people, students, sometimes working with us, and fair play, they would actually keep our rule of silence. But I thought to myself, here we have side by side those who are trying all the time to be in continuous prayer mode, keeping silence so as to be free to fly to God in prayer, continuous rosaries being said in the mind in the manual work, and so on, and someone else possibly in darkness, we don't know, possibly in grave sin, we don't know. But the same use of time was not the same interiorly. It was two realities side by side. And life is a bit like that. We are rubbing shoulders all the time with people who are on a different wavelength. And that can be closer to us than we think. Personally, with the Bishop's Accord, I don't go outside my own YouTube channel normally, and therefore one is avoiding being in contact with souls who are emitting ungrace through the cybersphere. Every time one is in contact with either a song or a message which is ungraced, one is in contact virtually with darkness and with the spirits that empower that darkness, and are finding all the time ways to infiltrate themselves into our very being. We are what we take in, with food and with mental food. So be careful what portals you open. You could be opening the jaws of hell and getting plugged into that which you don't need. At the end of time, it will all be sorted out. Nowadays, it's fashionable to belittle faith, the church, and yes, Christians. They haven't copped on. They're in a different world. Indeed. That different world, however, may be the only one that after death is going to matter. Do you think that by disbelieving something, one can annihilate it, like the Daleks? What we think is in there. We can think it or unthink it, but the soul goes on and cannot be annihilated. Nor, notice, can it command at that point what happens to it. For the first time, at the moment of death, the soul is no longer in charge. People who have had a near-death experience will tell you that one moment after, it's very different. At that point, the soul is on the receiving end of life and eternity. And all it's got at that point in its defense is what it's brought with it. And if that baggage is made of poking fun at all that represents God, that baggage is what it carries. And suddenly it cops on. Oh dear, I didn't realize. The month of November is a chance, my friends, to see things in their correct context. But it concerns us all insofar as it's not just a question of getting there, that's the fundamental one, but also of getting there in some kind of good shape. Compare. A young person, let's say a girl, who opts to keep her purity for Jesus and enters at a young age into a fervent convent where adoration goes on day and night and consecrates all the fibers of her being to love, is going to glide into eternity in love and at last open the eyes on the one that she loves. It's all been a homeward bound journey. Compare the other young person who wants from the beginning to have a good time. All the energy of that person goes into seeking what will give a good time. And usually nowadays it'll get hotter and hotter, heavier and heavier. One drug leads to another, one adventure leads to another, until we're on the nth adventure, and henceforth there's only depression left. That person may or may not make it. It depends how that person goes. But do you think that a life spent in looking for satisfaction, which is not that easy to find, as the Rolling Stones will testify, will find the same joy in gliding into the arms that make it? I tell you, my friends, that if it's not happened in this world, it'll start, if it's going to start at all, at zero in the great purgatory, the lowest level, until bit by bit, years perhaps later, it gets to some state where you can encounter its God. So it's not just getting there at all. There are all kinds of degrees in the midst. The devil knows it. It has come out in exorcism that they are responsible for the conspiracy of silence with regard to this issue of which I'm speaking, the last things and what composed them. They are making sure that hell is dismissed, and their ways and means of making sure it's dismissed in such a way, as they have put it, the less it's discussed, the more it fills up. And moreover, it is known that what gave the great preachers of history, of our history, their force, was the fact that they put before their people what mattered. There was an urgency in the air. Take away the weight of Christianity and give pie in the sky when you die, and you're not saying anything of value. On the contrary, you're giving a heretical message that we all get there, whatever we do. I was passing one day a church in the States, and it said on the billboard outside, "Too much sugar preaching leads to truth decay." The great preachers of our time have one thing in common with those who have gone before us. They knew how to command attention. It's no matter what you say with regard to the truth of what you're saying, if you haven't got their attention, because the grace is not hitting them, it's passing over their heads. When I was a child, the sermons were very long in Welsh. You'd be in chapel for an hour and a quarter. So we children would have ways and means of passing the time. In the evening service, we might be upstairs, admiring those downstairs who were listening carefully to this high-powered Welsh sermon. And we would have little pellets, and we would aim these pellets at the rim of the hat underneath us, just to pass the time. The word was passing over our head uselessly. However, occasionally we'd stop, because the preacher now and again would warm up, and we could see it coming. You could see, we have ignition, We have liftoff, and off he'd go, and carry the whole congregation with him. It's called hoil in Welsh, sail. He'd have his sails filled with the Holy Ghost. St. Anthony of Padua one day was thoroughly annoyed. No one wanted to listen. This story you know, but I'll say it again because perhaps it's more relevant than you think. There's a huge difference in the experience of preachers with regard to one congregation versus another. You can see and you can feel when they're listening and when they're not. There are certain indications. Children want to go to the toilet. People answer their phone or fiddle with it. And they look at their watches, not realizing that they're big children as well. They're exactly what we were doing with those parents, letting the grace cross over them. Why? We have nothing to learn. Oh? One day, St. Anthony was in a place I know, Rimini, where a great many infidels had gathered. Hoping to win them for the church, he preached to them, setting forth the faith of Jesus and the Holy Scriptures. But they wouldn't listen. So what did he do? He went to the banks of the river, close beside the sea, and standing thus upon the shore, betwixt sea and stream, he began to speak in the guise of a sermon, in the name of God, unto the fishes. Hear the word of God, ye fishes of the sea and of the stream, since heretics and infidels are loath to listen to it. And, having uttered these words, suddenly there came toward him so great a multitude of fishes, great and small and middle-sized, as had never been seen in that sea or in that stream, all of the people round about, and all held their heads up out of the water, and all turned attentively toward the face of Anthony. And the greatest peace and meekness and order prevailed, insomuch that next to the shore stood the lesser fish, and after them the middle-sized fish, and still after them, where the water was deepest, stood the larger fish. The fish being thus ranged in order, St. Anthony began solemnly to preach. He spoke about God's goodness to them in giving them good water and food. They could grow and multiply. Of how they were preserved during the great flood of Noah. That they were free to roam wherever they pleased. And all the other benefits given to them by God. Upon these and other familiar words and the teaching of St. Anthony, the fishes began to open their mouths and to bow their heads, and by these and other signs of reverence, according as it was possible to them, they praised God. As St. Anthony continued to preach, more and more fish joined the congregation, and none departed. Upon this miracle, the people of the town began to hasten forth, and among them were also the aforesaid heretics, the which, seeing so manifest and marvellous a miracle, felt their hearts sorely pricked, and they fell with one accord at St. Anthony's feet to hear his words. The saint began to preach to both the people and the fish. We are told that the people were strengthened in their faith, and the heretics converted. This done, St. Anthony dismissed the fish with the blessing of God, and they all departed with marvellous signs of rejoicing, and likewise the people. The saint stayed in Rimini for many days, preaching and reaping a spiritual harvest of souls. In 1996, still in formation, not yet he could even, the novice master took us from St. Antimo to the place where St. Anthony had been, in Rimini. And I knelt and prayed, because there on the ground was a place where something had happened which converted me from being a Protestant. It was where he'd got this mule to come fasting and presented to him the Blessed Sacrament. Right next to him there was a bag of meal which he wouldn't touch. He was told, "Dumb beast, adore your God." And he went down and adored the Blessed Sacrament. When I came across that at the age of 14 or 15, I said, if that's true, that beast knows more than I do. Perhaps we have something to learn.